Okay. 31.
I'm Bob Morgan, Council Central Staff, retired mostly. This is green sheet number 1191A1. It would add about $282,000 to the Finance and Administrative Services Department to install an audio frequency induction loop system, which we often refer to as the hearing loop. This would be in the Bertha Knight Landis room and the Boards and Commissions room in City Hall. The total of the total, about $117,000 is from the general subfund. $165,000 would be billed to other funds that use those rooms, or departments that use those rooms that have other funds. And the hearing loop, it assists people with impaired hearing. They can either wear wireless headsets in the rooms, or they can tune into the system with their hearing aids if those are specially equipped hearing aids. There was a similar system installed in this room earlier this year.
I have a question. Do we have any, perhaps Councilman Rasmussen has information on this, other than anecdotal comments, have we received any way of knowing how long has the loop been in force, and has there been any feedback on how many people have been affected?
I don't have that. I can get that information. I know that it's very recently come on board.
Has only been in place for about a month and a half,
yeah,
I think. And of course, when it was installed and made operable, there was a group of people here, advocates for people with disabilities, as well as hearing loss organizations and average citizens, who really said it made a huge difference in terms of being able to listen and participate in activities in this room. How many people come in here and actually use that? We haven't been tracking that. How many have been coming in and using it, if at all? We haven't been tracking that. I think that it is, hearing loss and people with hearing disabilities may be one of the most hidden type of individuals, the most hidden type of disability, because it's not readily visible to most people. So when we're trying to make accommodations or ADA or improvements, I think we do a pretty good job with regard to people with mobility disabilities and with sight impairment. But we have not done a good job in using current technology for people with hearing loss. Hearing loop is currently the best technology possible. What we had before, from what we heard from the hearing loss community and disabilities advocate, is that the system that we had before was not satisfactory. And so we upgraded it here, which is a good thing to do. And I think we need to do that also in other rooms in this building that are even more frequently used by the public, which is the Bertha Knight Landis room. The challenge that we have is retrofitting a room. The hearing loop system itself is relatively low cost compared to the total cost of retrofitting a room. It's removing the carpeting. Sometimes you have to remove chairs and other things and then put it all back together. But I think that we shouldn't have to especially ask for accommodations for people with hearing disabilities. That should be a normal part of our efforts to comply with the ADA, using current technology to provide the best access for people with hearing loss. And I think that our city should have a policy when they retrofit public spaces that they should also include the latest technology for people with hearing loss. And I shouldn't have to, well, I'm happy to, but the council shouldn't have to ask room by room to make it accessible. We don't do that for other disabilities, so why should we continually have to request room by room to make a room accessible for hearing loss, people with hearing loss?
Well, you know, I really appreciate your passion on this issue, and certainly there's an amount of logic, but for someone who has actually had hearing loss for the last 6 years, I am acutely aware of the need for improved hearing. However, I am also acutely aware of all the needs that the city and our citizens face. And I think it's not unfair nor cruel to ask before we make major investments how many people are affected, how many people are benefiting, and whether the timing is appropriate. If we've only had it in service for less than 2 months, and if we are going to try to do these improvements when it's perhaps easier when there's room remodeling, would we begin to remodel rooms that perhaps are ahead of schedule? If nothing else, I would consider at least perhaps putting a proviso on this for 6 months or so until we get some more data. Also, I'm concerned about how many people who have hearing aids may have hearing aids that are adaptable to the loop. I know when I acquired mine, I had to pay extra for Bluetooth, and I don't know, and this loop technology did not come up when I acquired mine. And so it's not just people who have hearing problems, and then the hearing aid on top of that, which are very expensive, but how many of those people who have hearing aids are actually equipped to receive this technology? So I just feel like we don't want to, obviously, for people who have any sort of disability to add extra burden to have them prove that they have to receive needs. And that's very compelling. But I think we also want to look at, are we just meeting a small portion of the people who actually have the disability? How many people are out there who have access to this technology? And I just don't feel like that's a question that is unreasonable. Perhaps we can find this information out in time to give us better information next week. I'd be fine with that.
We'll see what kind of information we can get, but I think you're setting a standard that is far higher for people with hearing loss and hearing disability than we're setting for people with other disabilities. Does the Department of Transportation ask how many people in wheelchairs cross an intersection before they install a wheelchair ramp? Do we ask how many people are blind before we install, tactile devices on traffic signal, pedestrian-activated signals? So I think that you're setting a standard that is incredibly high for people with hearing loss to say how many people would use this type of device before we'll install it. The challenge, as you may know, since you have a hearing loss, is that hearing loss affects people in a variety of ways, and so some people use sign language, some use a hearing aid such as yours, some use the hearing loop. My understanding from the hearing loss advocacy community is that this is the best system that we can now install that's being used more and more for hearing aids, but we can get more information for them. But I think it's a slippery slope to say how many people, are in wheelchairs in this neighborhood, or how many people would have a chip in their hearing aid that would use this kind of a system. I think we need to use the best practices that we can to accommodate people with disabilities, whether it's hearing disability, vision disability, mobility loss, and I want our city to be accessible to people with all disabilities, including access at City Hall.
Yeah, there's always the danger, I suppose, of raising issues like I've raised, because one tends to be labeled as not wanting to provide wheelchair ramps or providing other sort of services. So I hope you don't feel that that falls into that category. And again, I appreciate your passion on this. There are many things that we're all passionate about, and one could make, and I hope we do make, arguments for how we should deal with the homeless people who are outside our building every evening. You don't have regular shelter, and if we're willing to also spend the money for them as well. So,
just a question.
Councilmember Harrell.
I'm not going to get in the middle of you guys duking it out here. I just had a question about the funding sources. Is our thought in spreading it amongst the different departments, as an example, 14% with City Light, 41% in general subfund, et cetera, is the thought that those departments use those rooms, Bertha Knight, Lannis, and boards and commissions are around that ratio? Is that the thought there?
That was the ratio I was given by the budget analysts and the FAS, and I think it's intended to be based on usage.
I was a little unclear on why wouldn't the whole 281 just been divvied up that way then, as opposed to you start with a base at 116 and then 164 is divvied up that way?
It is. The 116 plus for the general subfund is the...
That's the 41.5%?
41.5%, yeah.
I see. I understand.
Councilmember O'Brien.
Yeah, I appreciate this discussion. I just want to anecdote. I had a chance on White Cane Day to go down to the Lighthouse for the Blind and do a walk with some of the folks around the city. And certainly you come out of that experience wanting to make investments for that population to make sure that they have safe crossings. And in an ideal world, we'd have budget to do to make great accessibility investments throughout the city for all folks with different disabilities. Unfortunately, the reality is that we have a finite pool of money, and I think it's important to continue to figure out how we have more money to make those investments, but it's also important that we're using whatever evidence or what we hear from community, where priorities are, to make sure we're making those smartest investments. And so I don't think it's going against our goals to provide accessibility to make sure that we're also using whatever information we have to make robust investments that are the priorities.
Let's move on, if we may.